Today is October 6th, 2008, just shy of 1 month before Election Day, and we're here at the News Press office in Fort Myers for the Editorial Review Board. As Chuck just pointed out, the dark clouds are gathering. If there is a more apt metaphor for the economy than that, I don't know what is. Let's go inside and have some fun. So is everyone scrambling around today for the Palin?
Well, yeah, it's
rally?
over, and supposedly, I think she's gone or whatever.
No, thank you. Good.
Is someone who start cutting some more golf and they're required by law to cut?
What do you have that's off?
Headed into, I wouldn't say off like October, November for sports. It's prime. It's a good.
What time did they get out there? Good. How are you? I think the goal of the accomplished with corporate jets or helicopters.
Getting here?
Traffic is pretty sad.
We got out left for all my. I'll just put it that way.
Excuse me.
At least here they won't tell us to lean back. Just so they can. Oh,
I like this one. Well, my grandchildren reading.
You really.
So why?
Yeah.
Because I want to call this they're loud.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Plazas, Community Conversation Editor of the News Press and Chair of the Editorial Board. Welcome to this endorsement interview with the congressional candidates for District 14 representing Lee and Collier counties. We thank the congressional candidates for being here with us today. We'll be asking them a series of questions and starting out with an introductory statement. This meeting is open to the public and on the record. This is being video recorded and will be posted on news-press.com shortly after today's date, which is October 6th. And with that, I'd like to ask each of the candidates, actually before I introduce the candidates, editorial board members, would you please introduce yourselves?
I'm Carol Hubler. I'm the publisher of the News Press.
I'm Jim Powers, a former Citizens member of the editorial board.
Darren Snyder, editorial writer.
Doug McGregor, editorial cartoonist.
Harley, citizen member of the editorial board.
Dennis Perlman, past member, citizen.
Steve Personette, citizen member of the editorial board.
Dan Warner, staffer and member of the editorial board.
Jack Eichenberg, former member.
I'm Steve Schiff, I'm a former member of the Citizens Board.
Martha Hill, Communications Link.
And today we'll be asking a series of questions. We've received your questionnaires. We thank you for filling those out. And following this, we'll have a discussion. Our endorsement articles will be coming out the week of October 13th. And we thank you for participating in this process. We'd like to start with each of the candidates giving a 2-minute introductory statement, starting with the incumbent, Congressman Mack, then Senator Saunders, then Mr. Neal, and then Mr. George. Congressman.
Thank you, and I want to first thank the board for accommodating a little time change for us, trying to make the Palin event and then make here, so I do appreciate that. Sorry for any inconvenience that might have caused. I look forward to continuing to serve the people of Southwest Florida. I think we've had a pretty good run so far the first 4 years. Whether it's a widening of I-75, just getting the approval for $131 million for a VA clinic in Cape Coral, a new post office in Estero. We made a correction to the flood map down in Naples that will save about 600 residents about $1,000 a month in insurance. We've been involved in a lot of different issues when it relates to the environment with WRDA, helped passing that. And you might remember that the president vetoed WRDA. We voted to override his veto because of how important water issues in our environment are to us here in Southwest Florida. I also want to talk a moment about what we do and what we've accomplished for constituents who use our office. We've had close to 13,000 emails to our office just this year, 800 phone calls, and hundreds of letters. And we've responded to them, and we've also been able to help citizens directly. And I know that both the newspaper and other citizens who have been involved with our office have expressed to me that how pleased they've been with the response they get from our office. As you may remember, we helped a few dentists who were being held in the Bahamas after fleeing Castro to come to the United States after they had already been granted visas to do so, and Castro was playing games with them. We participated in that. We've helped people with the IRS and Social Security. So I think from both what we've accomplished in Washington for the people of Southwest Florida and the people who have needed our assistance with dealing with Washington and the bureaucracies, it's always been the people first in my office. And I look forward to continuing to fight for the people of Southwest Florida on transportation issues, on our infrastructure and water. But we also have some serious challenges ahead of us, whether it's energy, that we need to continue to fight.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it. And we'll continue with further questions afterwards. Senator, please.
Thank you very much, David. I also want to thank the news press and the editorial board and the folks that are here for listening to us. This is a very important race here for Southwest Florida. Just a little quick story. There's a congressman over in Palm Beach. His name is Wexler. It turns out that he lives somewhere in the north, in the mid-east. I'm not sure if it's Kentucky or Missouri. But he claims his mother's address in Palm Beach as his home address. And that was an outrage. And quite frankly, we had the same situation here. We have a congressman, an incumbent, who really is not part of our community, doesn't live in our community any longer. And I think the citizens of Southwest Florida deserve to have a congressman who is part of the community and who works in the community. That's what got me started looking at running. I took a look at the incumbent's voting record, and I think his voting record, quite frankly, is out of touch with the needs of our community and the needs of the country. If you take a look at the voting record in reference to energy independence, other energy-related issues, I think you'll find that it's not consistent with the needs for diversifying our energy sources and moving away from the needs for foreign oil. Also, one of the things that is missing is the ability to use this office for community good. One of the things I've done as a member of the Florida Senate is work with various organizations. I'm working with the foreclosure task force here in Lee County, trying to find ways to keep people in their homes. Our congressional office is an office that has a tremendous amount of power that can be used for the good of the community in those types of things, and we're lacking that. And I would disagree with the incumbent in terms of constituent service. And I'm not going to list any names here, but we may get into that a little bit later on. I get calls constantly from people who have not gotten phone calls back from our incumbent's office, who have not gotten satisfaction in terms of information. And there's some elected officials, and we may have to go through some of those names before the evening is over. So that's what prompted me to run. I'm very active in this community and would like to continue to represent the citizens in Washington on issues like immigration reform, healthcare reform, energy independence, fixing the economy. And that's the reason that I made the decision to run.
Thank you. Mr. Neal?
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Neal. I'm a candidate for United States House of Representatives in Florida's 14th Congressional District. I'm running for this seat because I want to represent you in the United States House. Thanks to the board for entertaining this event again. I ran in 2004 and I ran in 2006. Those of you who remember our interview at that time remember that I was complaining then about the huge deficit in the United States of America. And it appears that I'm the conservative candidate at this forum today. I recognized 4 years ago how many resources are sucked from our economy by a $9 trillion and now $10 trillion deficit. But we continue to cut taxes, we continue to borrow and spend, further increasing our deficit, and you see what's happened to our economy as a result. Things are the same way in Tallahassee. They continue to cut taxes, they continue to cut the most vulnerable people, the children and those with mental illness problems, they're the ones who take the brunt of the spending cuts whenever the taxes are cut and there are no more revenues available. I hope to make that case to you again today, and I hope that you'll realize that Southwest Florida and the people of the 14th Congressional District who are mired in an economic downturn, foreclosures, loss of jobs, they deserve the representation that Robert Neal, a record keeper and tax preparer by trade, can bring to service them a way to reduce the deficit by increasing revenues and decreasing spending.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Mr. George.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff George, and I'm also running to be the representative for the 14th District of Florida. I grew up here in Southwest Florida. My family moved here in 1973 when I was 4 years old. Since then, I've been pretty much a resident full-time. I spent 5 years in the Army. I worked for an international wireless company for a few years, traveled the world. Currently, I own a small video production company. And that's kind of a unique blend of experience to run for Congress. But I think the true genius of the U.S. Constitution is that it was written to prevent a hereditary political class or career politicians or vicious partisan politics from wielding power and ruling over the American people. It's my intention to not only restore that principle, but to restore the fundamental integrity of the Constitution. This district is not being represented well in Washington right now. The most common complaint I hear from everybody that I talk to is that our current congressman isn't around to address their needs, that he's not responsive. Unfortunately, he's not alone in this. When it comes to representation in Congress, I think most Americans feel that they're not being well represented. And so many of the problems that we have are systemic in nature. I want to thank the news press and the editorial board for hosting this today. I want to thank everyone who's watching. And I also want to say how much I appreciate what they're doing online, because it mirrors what we're doing with our campaign as well. What we're trying to do is we're trying to use the new media in politics in a way that's never been done before. I want to be the eyes and the ears of the people in Southwest Florida. And to that end, we're using online video, we're using online chat, and every possible method that we can come up with to stay in touch with the people of this district. It's no problem, or excuse me, it's no question that we have a lot of problems that need to be faced right now. We have an economy that is based increasingly more on a cycle of debt. We have threats without borders like terrorism and climate change. And above it all, we have this big money corruption that affects electoral politics, it affects people's relationship with information in the media, and this has to change. And this is what I'm here for.
Sure. And before we go to the first question, Congressman Mack, would you like to address any of the criticism that your opponents have leveled at you?
Well, we'll just go on to questions.
Okay. One of the major questions we have here as an editorial board revolves around the financial bailout or rescue or whatever you call it. Congressman Mack, you voted against that and both occasions. If you could talk to us about the reasoning that you had for voting against it and what your thoughts are now going forward with the financial crisis that's hitting Lee County especially hard, and to his opponents, if you'd address that issue as well, what your position is on this bailout or rescue, and what are the solutions needed now here, especially here in Lee County.
Well, this was, let me back up. When I came out early against the idea of Washington using taxpayer dollars to bail Wall Street or out from their bad decision making, I wanted to share a little bit of a story. I had breakfast with Ben Bernanke Wednesday when they decided that night or the next day when they came out with a $750 billion bailout plan. And that conversation I had with Ben Bernanke was completely different than what we heard Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday. He talked about how we would start seeing real growth in our economy come the first quarter of next year. And so it was astonishing to me that in one moment you have someone telling me that we've had some bumps in the road, but we're going to get out of it, to then $750 billion bailout bill. I continue to believe, and I've always believed, that we should not use taxpayer dollars to bail businesses out and bail Wall Street out. Think about it this way. We just passed a bill for $700 billion when you have over 200 economists saying it wouldn't work and that we should look at free market principles to work us through this problem, that we're going to be in a recession, and if you add on top of that a tax liability, a bill for $700 billion, you're going to actually make the problem worse because the economy is going to fall, and then on top of that, to pay for it, you're going to have to raise taxes on the citizens of this great country. So I voted no, one, because I didn't want to continue the moral hazard that we created. Two, because using federal taxpayer dollars to bail out people who made bad decisions without doing anything to change the decision making that they're doing, I believe is a mistake. Three, I did not want to put that tax burden onto the American people, and I believe we should be looking at pro-growth policies. Myself and others, my colleagues, brought to our leadership a proposal that would either reduce or eliminate the capital gains tax, that would change the depreciation schedule for businesses. Imagine a small business, a restaurant, who buys a new, let's say, fryer, and they want to depreciate the value of that, be able to write that fryer off. Right now we say that they can do it, but over 35 years. That fryer's not going to be around in 35 years. That restaurant may not be around in 35 years. And so to have a depreciation schedule that is out of touch with business doesn't make any sense. Those two alone would put money into the economy, which is what's needed. I also talked about the accounting that we've all heard about, mark to market, that rule, that accounting structure needs to be changed. The uptick rule as it relates to short selling. We talked about needing to put liquidity into the market. There are other ways to put liquidity back into the market other than using taxpayer dollars to try to buy your way out of a problem that over 200 economists said won't work. And all we're going to do is leave the taxpayer in this country a larger tax burden, and we're still going to have the negative effects in the economy with the recession.
Thank you. Senator?
Thank you, David. I supported the bailout, and I wrote a letter to the editor of the news press so that the public would know where I stood on that. And I did that before the vote because I felt it was important for folks to know where I stood on this. Now, the polling shows that the American people are opposed to this. At one point, it was 2-to-1 in opposition to this. I'm not sure if it's still at that level. But even with it, I felt that this was something that was important for our economy. If we can't invest in our own economy, then I'm not sure what we can invest in. Now, the situation is simply this. Banks don't have money to lend. Businesses that are profitable are not able to get their lines of credit extended. They're not able to get lines of credit or loans for materials or for salary. People who want to buy automobiles, buy houses are not able to get credit. Even if they have good credit, they're not able to get funds necessary for that. The other thing that's important is the level of confidence that we have in our economy. We all know that we have a consumer-based economy, and consumer confidence really is important. And it was important, I believe, for the federal government to step up to the plate and say, okay, we're going to do whatever is necessary to save the American economy. We're not going to see a situation where banks stop lending, credit dries up, and good businesses start failing because they can't get credit. If you think employment is bad now, think of what it would be if these good operating businesses were not able to get credit. So I supported the bailout. Now, it's interesting to talk about the free market and free market solutions. And we're all capitalists. We all believe in the free market system. But we also believe in a regulated free market system. And I would submit to you that it is the lack of regulation that got us to where we are. It was the elimination of necessary protections for people and for businesses that permitted the greed that took over Wall Street and took over many of these institutions that are failing. You have to go back to the Clinton administration for the start of it. But it also occurred during the Bush administration. The elimination of underwriting and the things that protected people from buying homes that they couldn't afford. All of that disappeared. Free market was rampant, and this is what we've got. So we now have to pick up the pieces. I am convinced that these toxic securities that we're talking about that will be purchased with that up to $700 billion, most of that represents people who want to stay in their homes, people who want to continue to own their property, and they will work out a way to pay off those debts, and they'll work out a way to pay interest on that. And in the long run, the taxpayers will benefit in two ways. Number one, the economy will get kick-started much more quickly. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a couple of years before all of this works out, but it will be a less deep recession, and the economy will get started much more quickly. So the taxpayers will benefit that way. And the second way the taxpayers will benefit is that these toxic mortgages, if they're purchased properly using these reverse mortgages, reverse auctions rather, you'll start to see actually the federal government making money on this and get paid back. I again would submit to you that sitting back and doing nothing would have been a disaster.
Thank you. Mr. Neal?
I prepare income taxes for a living. That's how I support myself and my family. The first income tax return I prepared, and I'm going to date myself now, is a 1974 tax return. Taxes in 2007 were the lowest I've ever seen them in my life. And we have a $10 trillion deficit. Now, we call this a credit crisis, and the banks don't have any money. And the reason the banks don't have money is because the government has it all. If the government were not in debt to the tune of $10 trillion, there would be plenty of money out there to do research on alternative energy sources, to do health care for all Americans, to do education to the highest standards in the world. Those are the kind of things that can be done without a $10 trillion deficit. But you cannot reduce a deficit by continuing to cut taxes or spending money that we don't have. I supported the bailout because my bank is in the midst of an acquisition. I bank at Wachovia. They're in the midst of an acquisition because I think they're in imminent peril of failing. And I think there are other banks out there in that situation. And if any more banks fail, many more banks fail, then the FDIC will no longer be of any value either. Friends, we have a tough economic time now, and we must increase revenues. I propose to do that by reducing the qualified dividends available to American taxpayers. Currently, domestic dividends are taxed at a preferential rate, typically 15%. All domestic dividends that are qualified. I propose to reduce it to a maximum of $10,000 per taxpayer. What that will do is that will make the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates of the world pay a little bit more of their fair share of the revenues of the United States Treasury. In addition to reducing expenses, I propose to end the needless war in Iraq and save the billions of dollars that are spent there annually. By reducing expenses and increasing revenues, we can reduce the deficit, and when the deficit is reduced and brought down to zero, then our economy will be wonderful. We'll have plenty of money to do all the things that we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Thank you. It's interesting that we're hearing a nice range of proposals here. I agree with Mr. Neal that we need to increase the revenue and that the deficit is a big deal. I also agree with Senator Saunders on the need for more regulation. And unlike the two of them, I also, if I had had the opportunity, I would have voted against the bailout. And here's the reason why. The bailout, as we're looking at it right now, I think in the long run is not only going to not be effective, but it's going to cause us more problems by increasing the national debt and just increasing the level of debt that's out there in general. We talk about free market solutions, and like everyone up here, I'm a capitalist. I wouldn't be a good American, I think, if I wasn't. But at the same time, what we're practicing now is not capitalism in any true sense. It's this strange sort of casino capitalism, where it's not people investing in companies, it's not people investing in goods and services. It's people who are playing the market like they would play blackjack in Las Vegas. And this has got to change. This is what we need regulation for. We also need to take a look at some of the fundamentals of our economy. We need to go back and we need to take a good look at monetary policy. We need to take a look at the way that banks are creating the overwhelming majority of the money that's out there out of nothing but debt. We need to look at the overall soundness of the markets. You know, when we talk about this being a mortgage crisis, I think that's incorrect. The mortgage and subprime loans will precipitate this crisis, but there's something much deeper that we have to look at. This is really a credit crisis. And there are a lot of things that we have out there that I think generally people are unaware of. We have an unregulated derivative market that is worth $500 trillion worldwide. Now, to put that in perspective, if you take all the stocks and bonds in the world, that's about $100 trillion. If you take all of the real estate in the world, that's about $75 trillion. And here we're looking at $500 trillion worth of unregulated derivatives that, for the most part, everybody is questioning how much they're worth. They're questioning how it's insured. And we're looking at a much larger crisis. And I think that throwing $700 billion at it in the long run is really just a drop in the bucket. Again, we need to look at the fundamental underpinnings of our economy and address those issues.
Thank you. Editorial board members, questions? Dr. Lee?
Senator Saunders, with respect to your top 3 issues, you list number 1 is healthcare reform. And you say that $500 billion could be saved by cutting the overhead and by eliminating defensive medicine. And then you say the way that you would go about this is to require challenging both the insurance lobby and the trial bar lobby in Washington. Now, I don't understand how doing that is going to cause a private practitioner in his office who orders tests that he really doesn't feel are indicated solely because he wants to protect himself from lawsuits. So please explain to me how the lobbying, the insurance, and the trial bar is going to change his behavior, change the physician's behavior.
Good question. I appreciate it. Let me explain what I mean by all that. My wife's a physician. I'm a medical oncologist. When she was in private practice by herself, she had 2 people that did nothing but billing. They tried to figure out how to bill Medicaid, Medicare, and then all of the dozens and dozens of insurance products that are out there, because everybody has their own system. There's been a study that was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine a few years back that talked about the embedded overhead that we have in our complex system. And it's not the cost of building a hospital. It's not the cost of doing a surgery or doing a test. It's kind of an overhead, if you will, like the billing part of it, the profit for the insurance company. Those types of things that are not part of the actual delivery of care. And back in 1969 in this country, it was 17% of the medical dollar. In the last 30 years, it went from 17% to 31%. So it went up 14 points. Now remember, this is a $2.3 trillion industry, so 14 points on $2.3 trillion is almost $300 billion. So we're talking about a lot of money. In Canada, that same embedded overhead is about 16%. Now they have a single payer system that's a little simpler than ours, but our system has become so complex with the different rules, the different types of things for codes and things for the same types of procedure that it's become overly complex. I'm submitting to you that maybe that 31% should be reduced closer to where it was before at 17%. If we could get somewhere down that range, as much as almost $300 billion there. Now the issue of defensive medicine, again, my wife's a physician and has a good practice. And all doctors, every doctor you ask will tell you, yes, they do tests that probably aren't necessary, but they do it because of the issue of medical liability. It's been estimated that that's as much as 10 to 20% of the medical dollar. Again, $2.3 trillion industry, that's another $230 billion if you take the lower end of that. So that's where I come up with, there's $500 billion arguably that's wasted in this system. So why is it wasted? Well, if you take a look at where insurance companies and where other lobbyists and trial lawyer lobbyists, where they spend their money. They spend a tremendous amount of money loading up key members of the Senate, key members of Congress, the House of Representatives that deal with those issues, those committee members. And so nothing gets done. No one's looking at the big picture, if you will. Everyone's looking at tinkering around the edges, health savings accounts, all that's important. I'm suggesting that there are free market solutions to our health care problems. If we could reduce the cost of health care by 15 or 20%, that would get enough money back into the system to provide health insurance for everyone, to provide drugs for everyone. So this is something that's documented, and I'll be happy to get you a copy of the New England Journal of Medicine article on that. The Florida Hospital Association just did a study in 2006. Our hospitals in this state are operating on an operating margin of less than 0.8%. Their biggest business increase is in the uninsured. So in a few short years, hospitals on average in Florida on operations will be losing money. We're going to see safety net hospitals closing. We're going to see a tremendous problem there. About 25% of the patients that go into an emergency room in the state are uninsured, and that number is increasing. And so I'm submitting to you that if we could find those savings, we're not talking about creating any new money, we're not talking about any new taxes, we're talking about saving that up to $500 billion. There's a tremendous amount that can be done with that in terms of providing good quality health care for everyone in this country.
Perhaps I missed your answer, but you didn't explain to me, you started to hear it, how you're going to change physicians practicing defensive medicine and how lobbying insurance companies and the trial bar is going to do that.
Okay, and I apologize for that. What I'm suggesting is that there is no significant medical malpractice reform because of the power of the trial bar lobby, both in Tallahassee as well as in Washington, D.C. and around the country. I'm suggesting to you that there is not reform in the way we bill and deal with those complex billing issues because of the power of the insurance lobby, because that's the ox that we would be goring in both of those situations.
So how are you going to gore it?
By bringing attention to it and letting people know that enough is enough, that we have to change the way we do business in Washington, D.C., that powerful lobbyists can no longer control those types of issues, that people have to look at what's in the best interest of the American people when it comes to defensive medicine, when it comes to this overhead in this medical system. What's important is what is in the best interest of the American people. We cannot keep doing the same things we're doing. Take the instance of an automobile that's built in Detroit, a mid-sized car in Detroit. It costs $3,500 for that car because of embedded health care for the employees that built it and the employees that are still getting health care that are retired. Take that exact same car, build it in Canada, there's no medical cost associated with the vehicle. We can't compete with anyone else in the world on that issue alone. Now, there are other issues that make us non-competitive, but the healthcare issue is a very pervasive one, and we have to start tackling that. And I'm suggesting that letting the lobbyists know, having the public know that they're not going to stand for it anymore, I think will make a huge difference. That's one of the messages that I want to carry to Washington.
In the interest of time, are there any other questions from the editorial board?